Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. On Sunday night, Jerome Powell sat down with Scott Pelley, 60 Minutes, for an extended interview, at which point he said that there's still a lot of tools in the Fed's toolbox. I'd say after $6 trillion in enhanced liquidity from Congress, I would think there would still be a lot of tools left. He also offered this prediction on the U.S. recovery.
This is a time of great suffering and difficulty, and it's come on us so quickly and with such force that you really can't put into words the pain people are feeling and the uncertainty they're realizing. And it's going to take a while for us to get back, but I would just say this: in the long run, and even in the medium run, you wouldn't want to bet against the American economy. This economy will recover. It may take a while. It may take a period of time. It could stretch through the end of next year. We really don't know.
Can there be a recovery without a reasonably effective vaccine?
Assuming there's not a second wave of the coronavirus, I think you'll see the economy recover steadily through the second half of this year. For the economy to fully recover, people will have to be fully confident, and that may have to await the arrival of a vaccine.
Well, and there was some good news on the vaccine front yesterday, which sent the market roaring. Moderna's mRNA vaccine produced good results in its sort of early trials. The first phase of clinical trial examining whether the vaccine is safe and causes an immune response began in mid-March. 45 healthy volunteers aged 18 to 55 received varying doses. Moderna reported that all participants who had been evaluated after receiving 2 doses developed antibody levels at or above levels of those seen in patients who have recovered from the virus, which suggests the vaccine could be effective. Also, none of the participants experienced severe side effects.
Good.
So that's positive news, but we're still a long way from home. And there seems to be, to my way of thinking, undue hope being put in, but being laid at the table of a vaccine in terms of returning to the sort of normalcy that will allow the American economy to grow again. 16% of vaccines are approved, period, historically. The timeline for vaccines is usually in the years, if not decades, if ever. The lack of a vaccine ever being developed for a human coronavirus is notable, as is the fact that we've never developed a virus for anything on the warp speed timeline that people are talking about, end of this year, beginning of next year. Now, the resources being devoted to this are unprecedented as well, both in terms of mind share and money. So, you can be hopeful and realistic at the same time. They're not antonyms. But it just seems that, like, particularly when you talk about governors and their phasing, that you can't have any sort of gathering of more than 10 people until there's a vaccine.
Come on.
That is not presenting an opportunity for America to recover. Not on even the timeline that Fed Chairman Powell is talking about, and he's talking about the end of next year, maybe. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Jim Iuorio, CNBC contributor and restaurateur. Jim, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
What about the comments that Jerome Powell had over the weekend, including not just his recovery projections in terms of horizon, but also what he's saying about the tools that the Fed still has to prop things up?
Well, let's go after those first, which I think that what we've seen as far as fiscal policy and monetary policy combined here is absolutely staggering. I think it gets to numbers that we can't even comprehend those numbers. I actually believe that they are appropriate in times like this, but the thing that worries me the most is that they do things like this also when they're not appropriate, and they have the tendency to stay around long after this is over. And I think that the market right now, silver's up 40% since the beginning of March. Gold's higher too. What this is telling me is a very clear sign, is that the world is beginning to question fiat currencies, particularly the dollars. And it doesn't show up when you look at the dollar index, because the dollar index is measured against the euro, the yen, the Swiss, the British pound, which all are other currencies that are flawed, and their central banks are adding too much liquidity at this time as well. So this is, in my opinion, his, just opening up the purse and saying, what do you need to get through this, is the right thing to do now. But the mistake will be made in a couple months when it's time to pull back, and they won't do that, because that's when they always become very, very fearful. The things you said about the vaccine, it's wonderfully promising, and I liked the fact that the stock market welcomed that yesterday. But we are at a point now where we need a vaccine yesterday. Each week that passes, we are doing greater and greater devastation to the economy. And I always, in my mind, I put it, and this is, there's no exact science to this at all. If we had closed down for a week or 3 weeks, that mean it would take 6 months to recover. But every week that we're closed now, the devastation will probably tack on another 3 to 6 months of whatever the recovery is going to look like as we go. So it's great to hear that there's a vaccine. From an economic standpoint, it's not particularly relevant unless it's coming around the corner tomorrow.
And how's your business been doing?
Well, our business is a little different than most restaurants. We have unbelievable community support. I mean, and the way they've rallied around us is great. Yeah, we're losing money, and we're okay with that for the time being. And we're not really okay with that. I just say that because it sounds good. So let's say I'm okay with that.
Tell us the truth, man.
That's an interesting business model you have.
If I ever actually told the truth of what was really in my head, I think I'd be thrown in jail.
No,
I'll just. No, okay. Yeah, no, we're making money. I mean, we're not making money. We're losing money, but we're not losing that much money. But the restaurant industry is going to be changed for years to come. I read an article the other day, someone, estimating that 1 out of 4 restaurants is going out of business. I think that's probably relatively accurate. I think it's wonderful that people are supporting local businesses, and I hope that keeps up. There's a lot of businesses like ours too that where we really make our money is in the summer. We have great outdoor space.
Well, the summer's here.
In summer, it doesn't look like it.
What if patrons come to pick up and they sit in your outdoor space, and then Pritzker's police come by and give you a misdemeanor for having people out there, which would be either a $2,500 fine or 1 year in jail?
Can you believe
about
this
that?
is
and
happening?
It's extended his powers until October.
So what is even happening here where every time it seems like we're getting some bit of good news, they seem to crack down further and harder? This is something that blows me away. These are the things that keep me up at night. Is he identifying these big problem spots at restaurants that they needed to pass this emergency law to combat? And it blows me away. So does that scare us a little bit? Yeah, of course it does. But I do know that, Palatine and some of the other towns are involved with negotiation that if those negotiations turn into lawsuits, so be it. I respect the people who are pushing that agenda.
When it just going back to the macro picture, when Powell says tools in the Fed's toolbox, I mean, what you're really saying, look, we're going to prop up the market because what we're really trying to do is protect the investor class. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that because, that's where the money is. And if they take a dive, then the death spiral increases in pace. But is that effectively what he's saying?
Yeah, I think it is. And I hate to even say that because I like Jay Powell. I think he does a good job. But I can show you, historically over the last few years and how decidedly Fed rhetoric changes in the face of declining risk asset prices, meaning when the stock market goes down, all of a sudden they come out and say, no, we're here for you. So for someone to draw a conclusion that they're not caring a lot about propping up the stock market, I think it's easy to combat that because it's the fact that, yes, they're doing that. And then you can change like you said, change the debate into, well, is that ultimately a good thing? And I think probably it is. But it goes back to this whole, when you think of the investor class and this whole notion that we're all in this together, because I can assure you we are not all in this together. There's a lot of people who don't know how to feed their kids, and the investor class is doing just fine thanks to Jerome Powell propping up the stock market.
And politicians are doing fine, too, because no cuts whatsoever.
Not a penny to their cut. That surprises me because I would have thought that they would have come out and said, since tax revenues are going down, we should cut our salaries. There's that sarcasm again because I don't believe.
You're so funny. You're so funny. I wanted you to hear from another economist, just in terms of another colleague, a professional, a market analyst that has perhaps a different view on the reopening and the pace of it. That would be I Am Sam actor Sean Penn.
The motto that I go by, it's the same thing I think of just as a citizen with my own opinions that I'll not register right this moment. But again, when it comes to opening economies, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and blood is slippery. And we don't want to get a finger slipping on a hot trigger.
Mm-hmm. I know you are schooled in a lot of different economic philosophies. Could you tell me, per Pennonomics, where the supply and demand curves intersect in slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and blood is slippery?
What in the world is he talking about?
And you know what? Your finger slipping on a hot finger?
No, I don't even. Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to, and far be it from me to question, to Sean Penn's economic acumen. So I clearly we're out on a limb here.
Please remember, this was a top economic advisor to Hugo Chavez. So just consider that when you're hearing his advice and counsel for Chicago.
Of course, of course. What's sad though here is that obviously a lot of people listen to him. And a lot of people, I mean, you get the government that you deserve, I guess, and people voted in these people to political offices, and they're getting Sean Penn as their advisor. So, I mean, is that frustrating to people like us? Of course it should be. But when he starts to go, slow and caution, okay, we could be slow and caution and crater the economy and send us into the next Venezuelan-like depression. A lot of people die when the ship hits the rocks from an economic standpoint. So all you're doing here is trading one for the other. But the comedy of Sean Penn getting up there and lecturing us, what are we even supposed to do with that? I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
It was so. I mean,
I was hoping you'd know. Yeah.
Yeah, he was here.
I'm not your guy for that, right? I liked him better as Spicoli, though. If he would have done it in character, I think that I would have listened to him more.
Yeah.
Well, he was here, touring a test center.
Fascinating.
With Mary Lightfoot. I know him and some Chef Andreas, and Chef Andreas is telling me not.
Okay,
to
let's
stay
give him a couple
inside,
kudos.
please.
If he's drawing attention and saying people go out and get tested, people go out to get serology tests, okay, I'll give him a pat on the back. And I know he's done some charitable work too. The whole thing is, of course, comical, but I don't even know where I was going with that. Let's go back to piling on.
Comical is a good place to end, I think. I think that's an appropriate place to end. Let me ask you this. So you have very different approaches being taken by different states, although most are moving much more quickly than, say, Illinois is to reopening. Can you have a booming Texas and a booming Florida and a booming southwestern part of the United States and a stagnant New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and Illinois and California and still have a optimistic economic outlook for the country?
There's absolutely no. Everything operates on thin margins, leverage, and fragility as an economy kind of moves into fairly late stages like we were before. If you take out, 4 of the biggest producing states, there is absolutely no way that we can have a large-scale boom or whatever you'd call it, missing those states. So that's even a silly concept to consider. So the answer to that is an absolute no.
But the problem with that reality is then that encourages ultimately policymakers and appropriators to figure out a way to prop up New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, Illinois, California when it comes to their widely unfinanceable, unfunded liabilities.
Well, we've talked about that in the past, and I don't even blame a politician for looking at a situation as it comes to them and thinking in terms of it as, how can I do my job, one, but how can this affect me and how can it affect me positively? I think that it's just a normal human characteristic. But for someone like what's his name, J.B. Pritzker, I've heard him 3 times talk about how Illinois finances were anywhere between okay and good prior to the coronavirus. Now, we know that's absurd. That's ridiculous. But then you realize that the cratering of the economy in Illinois in some ways could affect him positively if he continues to lobby for a bailout and just keeps pointing at the rubble saying, gosh, see what coronavirus and coronavirus alone did to our economy. Nothing else, but just coronavirus. And that, to me, that's awful convenient, and it creates kind of misaligned incentives. And I'm not accusing anyone of anyone, at least not on this phone call. But to see that So look at November and say, well, gosh, if someone who's more sympathetic to my cause gets in office, perhaps we get a bailout. I think these are normal thoughts. Acting on them is disgraceful, of course.
Well, and Gavin Newsom is doing the same thing in California. He's on Tapper over the weekend saying, we were doing well. I paid down $9 billion in unfunded liabilities last year. The state of California has $1.5 trillion in unfunded liabilities. His $9 billion is pocket lint. I mean, these guys are they're doing exactly what you're saying. And it's going to be up to, I guess, the steadfastness of Mitch McConnell to prevent them from getting a windfall that goes well beyond any damage that COVID-19 did. That wasn't self-inflicted.
There's something that's even more frustrating, though, too, is that there's a large amount of people who sit there and listen to those ridiculous words and say, yeah, that checks out. And that doesn't check out. You know what I mean? It's just you're being lied to.
He is Jim Iuorio, CNBC contributor and restaurateur, proprietor of Brant's in Palatine, which you should patronize. Jim Iuorio, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of Nature's fruits and vegetables in a capsule, changing the world one life at a time.
I got really good hopes for it. I try to eat healthy, but there's no way I can get the nutritional equivalent in my diet that I get from Balance of Nature. What you eat today determines the kind of cells your body's going to make tomorrow. Instead of eating, 15 pounds of vegetables, you can take this product. I think in the future, from taking Balance of Nature, my body's going to be making a lot better quality cells. I'm really excited about this product. You're going to get enough to make a big difference.
Don't wait to see what getting over 10 servings of whole fruits and vegetables every day can do for you. Right now, Balance of Nature is offering free shipping and 35% off on any new preferred order. Start your journey to better health today.